The call came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Evelyn Harper, 72 and long retired, was knitting by the fire when her phone buzzed on the table beside her. She glanced at the screen and saw her son's name, Mark Harper, flash across the display. Her heart skipped. It had been months since his last call. "Mom." His voice came through warm and cheerful, almost like the old days. "We want you here for Thanksgiving this year. Everyone's coming, Lydia, the kids, even Aunt Marie. It wouldn't be the same without you." For a moment, Evelyn sat frozen. Thanksgiving. Her favorite holiday, and one she'd spent alone for the past 3 years. "You mean it, Mark?" she asked softly, afraid to sound too eager. "Of course," he laughed. "Fly out, Grandma. We want you here for Thanksgiving." That sentence, "we want you here," wrapped itself around her like a soft blanket. She smiled so wide her cheeks ached. After hanging up, she sat there for a moment, her old heart blooming with hope. That night, she pulled out her small savings envelope from the drawer, the one she had been quietly collecting from her pension. Plane tickets weren't cheap, but she didn't care. Family was worth every penny. She booked the flight immediately, imagining the laughter around the table, the smell of turkey roasting, and her grandchildren running into her arms. In the days that followed, Evelyn prepared as if she were going to a grand ball. She took out her best wool coat, ironed her floral dress, and even bought a new pair of gloves. At the local market, she picked up fresh pecans and canned pumpkin, determined to bake her famous cookies, the same ones Mark used to steal as a boy. Her small house felt alive again. She hummed while she baked, dusting the cookies with cinnamon and sugar, packing them carefully into a tin decorated with autumn leaves. She even wrote a note on top, "For my sweet family with love, Grandma." The night before her flight, she could barely sleep. She sat by the window, watching the moon glow over the quiet Oregon pines, and whispered, "Harold, can you believe it?" speaking to her late husband's photograph on the mantel. "They still remember me." The next morning, she dressed early and took the bus to the airport. The world felt big again. Travelers rushing past, children laughing, the smell of coffee filling the air. When her plane took off, Evelyn looked out the window, watching her town shrink beneath the clouds. During the flight, she thought about all the Thanksgivings she had missed. Birthdays forgotten, calls unanswered, holidays spent watching television alone. But none of that mattered now. This time, things would be different. Her family wanted her. When the plane landed, Evelyn's hands trembled slightly as she sent a text. "I've landed safely, honey. Can't wait to see you all." She smiled and waited at baggage claim, her suitcase beside her, her cookie tin resting on her lap. But as passengers were reunited with hugs and laughter, and one by one the terminal emptied, Evelyn remained sitting, waiting, and waiting. Her smile began to fade, but her heart whispered, "They're just running late. Families get busy." She didn't know it yet, but that was the moment her Thanksgiving, and her heart, would begin to change forever. By the time Evelyn stepped out of the airport, dusk had settled over the city. The wind was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine and roasting chestnuts from nearby vendors. She waited on a bench outside the terminal, her suitcase by her feet and her cookie tin resting on her lap. Her phone screen glowed faintly, no new messages. "They must be caught in traffic," she murmured, tucking a stray strand of gray hair behind her ear. She called Mark again. It rang and rang before going to voicemail. She tried Lydia's number. No answer either. An hour passed. Then 2. The crowds thinned until only a few stragglers remained. Evelyn's smile began to fade, replaced by a quiet worry that pressed against her chest. A young couple noticed her sitting there and offered help, but she simply shook her head, forcing a polite smile. "My son's coming," she said softly, though even she no longer believed it. Finally, with trembling hands, she hailed a taxi. "Harper Lane, Willowbrook Heights," she told the driver, her voice barely above a whisper. The driver nodded and turned up the heater. As the city lights blurred past, Evelyn tried to calm her racing thoughts. Maybe there was confusion. Maybe he thought I'd take a cab. The taxi pulled into the neighborhood. Wide streets lined with glowing houses, laughter drifting from open doors. Families gathered around tables. Her heart lifted at the sight of Mark's familiar white 2-story home, the windows glowing warmly against the night. She paid the driver, smoothed her dress, and carried her cookies up the walkway. The house looked beautiful, garlands on the porch, pumpkins by the door, and the sound of cheerful chatter inside. She could even hear clinking glasses and the faint tune of holiday music. Relief washed over her. Of course, she thought. They must have lost track of time. She rang the bell, smiling wide, ready to see her family again. No one came. She waited, then knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. Through the window, the golden light spilled across the floor, and curiosity tugged at her. She took a step closer and peered inside. And in that moment, her breath caught in her throat. There they were, Mark, Lydia, and the grandchildren, sitting around the Thanksgiving table, laughing, talking, plates full of food. But at the head of the table, in the seat that once belonged to her late husband, sat another elderly woman. Caroline, Lydia's mother. Evelyn froze, her fingers tightening around the cookie tin until her knuckles went white. She watched as her grandson leaned against Caroline's shoulder, giggling. "Grandma Caroline makes the best pies." Mark raised his glass, smiling. "To family, the ones who really matter." The word struck her like a slap. Evelyn stumbled back from the window, her eyes stinging. The cookies slipped from her trembling hands, the tin crashing onto the porch. The lid popped off, and her perfectly baked cookies rolled into the grass, crumbling one by one. She turned and walked down the street, her vision blurred by tears. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew she couldn't stay there, watching them laugh while pretending she didn't exist. A few blocks away, she found a quiet park, empty except for a flickering streetlight and a wooden bench. She sat there, hugging her coat tighter against the cold. The air smelled of wood smoke and damp leaves. She wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand and whispered, "You said you wanted me there, Mark." Her voice broke on the last word. When her phone buzzed, she looked down. A text message. "Sorry, Mom, plans changed. Let's do something at Christmas, okay? No apology. No worms." Just a casual dismissal. Evelyn stared at the screen, the glow reflecting off her tears. Something deep inside her shifted. Not anger, not yet, but a hardening. She sat under that cold light for hours until dawn began to creep over the sky. By morning, she checked into a small roadside motel. The clerk asked, "Visiting family?" She smiled faintly. "Not anymore," she whispered. That night, as the city celebrated Thanksgiving, Evelyn made herself a cup of tea in the motel room and whispered to the empty air, "You forgot me once, Mark. But this time, I'll make sure you remember me, just not the way you expect." The days after Thanksgiving passed in silence. Evelyn returned home to Oregon with her suitcase half unpacked, and the stale scent of motel soap still lingering on her coat. Her heart felt heavy, not just with sadness, but with something sharper, quieter, and deeper. For the first time in her life, she didn't cry when she thought of her son. The tears had already run dry. What filled her now was resolve. A calm, deliberate resolve that came from a lifetime of endurance. She looked around her little cottage, faded curtains, a dusty bookshelf, and her husband's old armchair still sitting by the window. It had always been a lonely space, but now, for the first time, Evelyn didn't see loneliness. She saw possibility. She walked into the kitchen, picked up her old recipe book and flipped through its worn pages. Each stain and smudge told a story: birthdays, anniversaries, family gatherings from years long gone. As she traced her finger over a page titled "Pumpkin Pecan Cookies," Harold's favorite, she smiled softly. Maybe it was time to start again. Not for them, but for her. That night, she called her friend Nancy, who owned a small antique store downtown. "Nancy," Evelyn said with a spark in her voice, "what do you think about turning that empty space next to your shop into a cafe? A little bakery, like the one Harold and I used to dream of." Nancy laughed in surprise. "At your age, Evie?" "At any age," Evelyn replied, a glint of pride in her tone. Within a month, Evelyn began transforming the dusty little space into something beautiful. The townsfolk watched curiously as the elderly widow painted the walls herself, hung lace curtains, and filled the air with the warm scent of cinnamon and sugar. She worked tirelessly. Her hands ached, her back protested, but her spirit soared. When she finally opened the doors, she named it Second Chances Cafe. At first, it was just a handful of regulars, a young mother who came for coffee, a retired teacher who loved her pies, and a few locals drawn in by the smell of fresh bread. But word spread quickly. People loved not just her food, but her warmth. Evelyn greeted every customer with genuine kindness, the kind that came from knowing what it felt like to be forgotten. Soon, the cafe became the heart of the little town, a place where no one felt alone. She hosted weekly family Fridays, inviting anyone without loved ones nearby to share a meal. The laughter that filled the cafe each evening healed the quiet cracks in her heart. Then one afternoon, as Evelyn was refilling the cookie jar, the phone rang. The voice on the other end made her pause mid-step. "Mom? It's Mark." For a moment, the air felt still. "Oh," she said softly. "Hello, Mark. I saw an article about you," he said quickly. "About your cafe. They said it's doing really well. I didn't realize you'd become so successful." Evelyn smiled faintly, though her voice remained steady. "I didn't realize it either. Life has a funny way of surprising us when we least expect it." Mark cleared his throat. "Listen, Mom, I was thinking, maybe we could talk about you helping with my company. Things have been hard lately. Maybe you could invest a little? It'd mean a lot." For a long moment, Evelyn said nothing. Then she replied gently, "Oh, Mark. I thought you only wanted family who really mattered." There was a stunned silence. Evelyn could almost hear his guilt over the line. "I'm sorry, Mom. It's all right, dear," she interrupted kindly. "I wish you well. But I'm very busy this Thanksgiving. My cafe family needs me." And with that, she hung up, her heart lighter than it had been in years. Outside, the evening sun bathed the cafe in gold, and Evelyn whispered to herself, "Second chances aren't given, they're made." A year passed since that cold Thanksgiving. The one that had broken Evelyn's heart only to remake it stronger. Now every corner of Second Chance's cafe glowed with warmth. Strings of golden fairy lights hung in the windows, soft piano music played in the background, and the scent of roasted turkey, cranberry bread, and cinnamon filled the air. It was Thanksgiving again, but this time, Evelyn wasn't waiting for anyone. People were already lined up outside her cafe, clutching coats and smiling in anticipation. She'd announced a special community feast for anyone who had no family to celebrate with. The sign on the door read, "Everyone deserves a seat at the table." Inside, the cafe buzzed with laughter and chatter. Evelyn moved gracefully from table to table, her silver hair pinned neatly, her apron dusted with flour. She laughed as she poured hot chocolate for a little boy whose parents were stationed overseas, and handed an extra slice of pie to a widower who had come alone. Every smile, every thank you, every full belly. It all filled the empty places in her heart that her own family had once left hollow. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting amber light through the windows, a car door slammed outside. Evelyn looked up from the counter just as the cafe door opened. The laughter dimmed slightly. There they were, Mark, Lydia, and the children, standing awkwardly in the doorway. Mark's face looked older, heavier somehow. Lydia held a casserole dish in both hands, her smile uncertain. "Mom," Mark said quietly, stepping forward. "You look wonderful." Evelyn smiled, her expression gentle but unreadable. "Thank you, dear. What brings you here?" He hesitated. We heard about your feast. The kids wanted to see you." Her granddaughter peeked out from behind him, clutching a small pumpkin toy. "Grandma," she whispered, "I missed you." That small, trembling voice cracked something inside Evelyn. She knelt and opened her arms, and the little girl ran straight into them. Evelyn held her close, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair. "I missed you too, sweetheart." Lydia cleared her throat softly. "Evelyn, we owe you an apology. Last year, we were wrong. I was wrong. You didn't deserve that." Mark's eyes glistened. "Mom, I can't stop thinking about that night. You came all that way and He looked down ashamed. "I don't know how to make it right." Evelyn stood, her voice calm and steady. "You can start by never doing that to anyone else." She smiled faintly. "I forgave you a long time ago. But forgiveness doesn't mean going back to the same table." Mark nodded slowly, tears brimming. "I understand." She touched his arm gently. "You have your life, Mark. I have mine now. And it's a good one." The family stayed for a while, helping serve food, laughing with guests, tasting her pies. For a moment, it almost felt like the old days, before distance and pride had taken root. When they finally left, Evelyn walked them to the door. Her granddaughter turned and waved. "See you soon, Grandma?" Evelyn smiled. "Maybe, darling. The door is always open, if you come with love." Later that night, the cafe emptied. Evelyn sat by the window, watching soft snow fall over the street. The glow of the sign outside reflected on the glass. "Second Chances Cafe." She whispered to herself. They said, "Fly out, Grandma. We want you here for Thanksgiving." I landed. Waited. Called. Then I saw. Her voice softened, filled with quiet triumph. But what I found after was worth far more than what I lost. She sipped her tea, smiling as laughter drifted from the kitchen. Her heart no longer ached. It was full of peace, of purpose, and of love freely chosen. For the first time in many years, Evelyn Harper didn't feel forgotten. She felt found.